Washington's ban on Chinese tech giant Huawei is taking effect this Tuesday. The tech giant may have to withdraw from high-end smartphones and the 5G equipment market. A Chinese tech company with close ties to the communist regime is collecting the data of nearly 2.4 million people around the world. Australia is probing into whether China is meddling in Australian votes, and another Australian politician is being asked about his choice to sign on to China's Belt and Road Initiative. China state councillors said that China will be a high-income country in 5 years from now, but 5 years ago he already said exactly the same thing. And when human rights lawyers in China are sent to prison by authoritarian regimes, their families continue their fight. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. First, we looked at some of China's human rights lawyers, many of whom have been suppressed by the communist regime. But while they endure their prison sentences, their families continue their fight.
Chinese lawyer Yu Wensheng was sentenced to 4 years in prison by the authoritarian regime. His secret court hearing was held 3 months ago in Xuzhou City, inside the eastern Jiangsu province. His wife Xu Yan made the court's ruling public on Sunday. One of Yu's so-called crimes was giving interviews to NTD, specifically our Chinese language section, and to other media outside China. In his interviews, he often detailed Chinese authorities' misconduct. Yu was also charged for legally defending those in need. His clients include suppressed human rights lawyers, as well as practitioners of the spiritual meditation discipline Falun Gong, who've been brutally persecuted for their beliefs in China for the past 20 years. Yu's wife discovered 11 accusations made against him by the court. Several involve comments Yu had previously made about Falun Gong, like this one. The authorities' suppression of Falun Gong is completely wrong and is political persecution, while other comments condemn Chinese authorities, like this one. There is no law and order, and authorities are suppressing people in an inhuman way. The rule of law in China is going backwards. The authorities are the destroyers of the rule of law. Using these and other comments as evidence to convict him, Yu was charged with what's called inciting subversion of state power by the court. But his wife accuses the court of violating the country's constitution.
It's a lawyer's right to defend people. It's part of the freedom of speech. The Chinese constitution also stipulates that citizens have freedom of speech, but he has been sentenced just because of this.
She explained that since her husband's imprisonment began, he has lost partial function of his right hand. She suspects it's a result of torture in prison. Neither the prison he's detained in nor the local security bureau have given her an explanation. Reporting by Xiong Bing and Huang Yuning, NTD News.
The back-to-school boycott happening in China's Inner Mongolia region is entering its third week. But Beijing is tightening its grip on the situation. According to the New York-based Southern Mongolian Human Rights Information Center, at least 9 Mongolians have lost their lives. That's in addition to the thousands that have been arrested during protests. The turmoil sparked weeks ago over a Beijing initiative to replace the Mongolian language with Chinese in the region's schools. Now, authorities are hunting down students, aiming to make them return to school, as parents seek to keep them home. Even in the most remote rural communities, locals report a heavy police presence. Authorities in one district issued an urgent notice on Saturday. It demanded that all Mongolian parents send their children to school within 3 days. And for those who don't, authorities will hold them fully accountable. That means if they don't return, student school registration status will be terminated. Plus, their teachers and even the school principal will be disqualified from receiving promotions for 3 years. Their parents will also face punishment. To start, they'll be prohibited from taking out bank loans. Those who work for the local government will be removed from their posts, while workers will be fired from their jobs. Parents of low-income households and those who are disabled will also no longer receive benefits and disability subsidies. Lastly, a document published on Sunday revealed parents who refuse to send their children to school will be fined up to 5,000 yuan. That's around $700, a huge amount of money for the region's relatively poor population. The document was issued in various districts inside Inner Mongolia. A video posted online also shows the situation of those students who were forced back to school. Many of them refused to participate in class, with some leaning on tables and others crying. Some parents recently began homeschooling their children, like in this video. The language written on the blackboard is native Mongolian. Chinese Communist Party's leader Xi Jinping's state councilor recently issued a statement, but it's extremely similar to remarks he made 5 years ago. His words have raised questions about how Beijing is handling the country's development strategy. State Economic Counselor Justin Lin Yifu recently claimed that China will be a high-income country in 5 years. His statement came during 2020's International Investment Forum. During the forum, he also said various projections show that China could cross the $12,700 per capita income threshold by 2025. According to him, that would indicate the country had become a high-income economy. Last year, China's GDP per capita just exceeded the $10,000 mark. That's according to statistics published by the communist regime. But due to the regime's lack of transparency and the way Chinese officials tend to overstate economic figures, we cannot verify the number independently. Even if the figure was accurate, there's still a $2,700 gap between it and the standard of a high-income economy. 5 years ago, Lin also made similar remarks. During the country's first Thought China Forum in September 2015, he said China was likely to be among the high-income countries in the next 5 years. At the time, that meant by 2020. He asserted that by then, China would become the third economy to move from low income to middle income to high income, after South Korea and Taiwan. Born in Taiwan, Justin Yifu Lin defected to China in 1979. Taiwan's Ministry of Defense has issued a permanent warrant for his arrest. Hong Kong pro-democracy activists gathered outside court on Tuesday. More than 24 campaigners appeared there over a banned visual to mark the 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown.
Hong Kong activist leaders Joshua Wong, Jimmy Lai and 24 others from the pro-democracy movement were in court on Tuesday over the banned vigil that they participated in June. The vigil commemorating the 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown. It was the first time in 3 decades that the vigil had been banned in semi-autonomous Hong Kong, with police citing coronavirus restrictions as the reason. Still, despite the ban, tens of thousands of people lit candles across the city in what was largely a peaceful event on June the 4th, bar a brief skirmish with riot police in one neighbourhood. Lee Chuk-yan was one of the vigil's organisers.
We insist that condemning the Tiananmen massacre every year with a candlelight is no crime. We insist that we have the constitutional right to express ourselves against the Tiananmen massacre and to commemorate those who sacrificed.
The anniversary struck at an especially sensitive time, falling just as Beijing prepared to introduce its new security legislation, which punishes anything China sees as subversion, secession, terrorism, or collusion with foreign forces, with up to life in prison. June the 4th commemorations are banned in mainland China, but Hong Kong traditionally held the largest vigils globally every year.
A Chinese mainlander says he understands the plight of Hong Kongers. He says the region will change tremendously now the CCP is taking over. Former Alibaba senior technician William Guo describes his journey in Hong Kong in the second part of our interview.
William Guo has been working as a senior Alibaba technician for 2.5 years. He specialized in overseas Ali Cloud technology business and was a top expert in the industry. Before that, Guo used to work in Hong Kong for a couple of years. He started his job there since 2011. Unlike the short-term business trips he had before, the longer stay considerably changed his outlook. His first impression of Hong Kong was that it was a clean and convenient place to live. He said he felt different when going shopping or eating in restaurants there. It had an atmosphere different from that in mainland China. He then realized that what he felt was a sense of security.
Once you go across the Hong Kong border, for example, if you enter China from the Shenzhen border, you will need to hold tight to your kids. But if you're in Hong Kong, you will allow your kids to play around. It's a lot safer.
He said honestly that the June 4th memorial gathering in Victoria Park did not mean much to him back in 2011. He still believed the descriptions from media mouthpieces of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. They said the student protests in 1989 in Beijing were riots, committing violence against and even killing Chinese soldiers. He said that's all the CCP media wanted Chinese people to know.
Every day at 7 p.m. sharp, people will watch the CCTV newsfeed. There is nothing but this to watch.
CCTV is the most important state-run TV in China, and it keeps strictly in line with the Communist Party. Its English version for viewers outside of China is CGTN. But the era of freedom in Hong Kong changed Guo little by little. Media outlets with different views have been seen in Hong Kong. He started to realize the student protest in Beijing resulted in a bloody massacre by the Chinese army and that many young people died. And he remembered how some Hong Kong police safeguarded the protesters in the pro-democratic umbrella movement, which had surprised him. As he learned to enjoy the freedom there, the CCP strengthened its efforts to take over. Guo said Hong Kongers understand the rule of law very well, so it's a big deal that the extradition law was enforced, which eroded Hong Kong's freedoms.
The thing is, when it becomes legislation, hope for Hong Kongers fades.
But he said it doesn't mean that they give up. People just choose their best way to persist. He talks about immigration and Hong Kongers flowing to Taiwan.
As an ordinary person, if you feel there is no way to fight it, you will find a safer place to keep up the fight.
As a mainland Chinese, Guo witnessed the change Hong Kong had been through and shows deep understanding of the struggles Hong Kongers have. For them, they were once free, and now they are not. He said they will certainly stand up and fight. Reporting by Xu Wenhui, NTD News.
The Trump administration's crippling ban on Chinese telecoms giant Huawei takes effect on Tuesday. The move aims to cut the tech company off from its chip suppliers. One Chinese state media report says turning to other markets might be Huawei's only way out. NTD's Juliet Song reports.
The U.S. ban on Huawei is taking effect this Tuesday. It marks the day the Chinese giant officially loses access to advanced chip supplies. And these chips are vital for making its high-end smartphones and 5G equipment. Chinese state media outlet Security Times reports that Huawei is now facing a dead end in the smartphone market. The report says a semiconductor expert who said the company's only way out is to turn to other areas, like laptops or cars. The expert said it's difficult for Huawei to look for alternative chip suppliers in China. That's because Huawei needs advanced chips for its high-end smartphones. But compared to its overseas suppliers, Chinese manufacturers' technologies lag generations behind. Even some Chinese manufacturers may have trouble circumventing the U.S. ban. Under it, if chip makers using American technology were to supply chips to Huawei, they'd have to get a license from the U.S. first, and the bar for the license is high. Even China's largest chip maker, SMIC, still needs Washington's approval to continue supplying Huawei. The Chinese expert cited by Security Times said even though the company can access low-end chips, it wouldn't give Huawei a competitive edge. Another last-ditch option is to establish a self-reliant semiconductor supply chain, but that's no easy job either. China has been trying for years to produce its own cutting-edge semiconductors, but that effort just suffered a setback. Of the two companies supposedly leading the country's tech breakthroughs, one is on the verge of collapse, while the other faces potential U.S. sanctions. Juliet Song, NTD News.
Oracle wins the bid over Microsoft in TikTok sale talks. Oracle is a U.S.-based multinational computer technology corporation and is happy to announce its cooperation with TikTok, the video sharing platform with about 100 million monthly active U.S. users. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin also confirmed that the government received Oracle's bid for the TikTok operation. A key issue for the deal was U.S. user data protection. Whether the deal will be approved by the Trump administration now becomes the focus. President Trump signed an executive order on August 6th, ordering Chinese company ByteDance to sell TikTok to a U.S. company. The sale had to be done within 45 days, or TikTok would have been banned in the U.S. Oracle said Monday that it would work with ByteDance and keep TikTok operations in the United States. Oracle said it would be structured as a partnership rather than an outright sale. This is part of the proposal that ByteDance submitted to the U.S. Treasury over the weekend. In the proposal, Oracle will be TikTok's trusted technology provider. According to Mnuchin, the deal includes a commitment to make TikTok a U.S.-based global company. The move will create 20,000 new jobs. Federal officials have seized a shipment of counterfeit masks. A huge amount of fake N95 masks came in from China. Chicago Customs and Border Protection officers took a sample of masks from a shipment coming in from China. The shipment contained 500,000 masks. It was bound for a company in New Jersey. The CDC tested the masks and they found that 1/10 were below 95% effectiveness at filtering. The entire shipment was then seized. The FDA have already barred more than 60 N95 type mask manufacturers in China from exporting to the U.S. Testing found that many of their products were far short of our quality standards. And in a separate move, Senator Tom Cotton wants to strip China of its permanent most favored nation status. He says the special trade status is what caused the loss of American manufacturing jobs to China. He'll introduce a new bill this week.
Senator Cotton, an Arkansas Republican, said the bill would instead make China's status subject to an annual review and approval.
This week is the 20-year anniversary of granting China permanent most favored nation status, something that Joe Biden voted for and that he still defends to this day, even though making that most favored nation status permanent and automatic, putting it on autopilot every year, led to the so-called China shock when we sent millions and millions of our manufacturing jobs to China.
The move to give China the status normalized trade relations between the United States and China. It also opened the floodgates to American investment in China and encouraged U.S. companies to develop China-centric supply chains. Cotton said that by making the special status subject to annual review and approval, this would put pressure on China's communist leaders to uphold their trade obligations and the rights of their own citizens.
What happened before 2000 is that the president and the Congress would review China's progress towards being a market-based economy and protecting human rights. There were some pretty fierce debates in the 1990s on an annual basis about Chinese backsliding, especially after Tiananmen Square. We need to go back to that approach.
The Trump administration has criticized China for unfair trade practices like intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers. In 2018, President Trump launched an effort to rebalance the U.S.-China trade relationship. When negotiations on a trade deal stalled, Trump imposed tariffs, which now total around $400 billion.
Direct evidence of China's monitoring and data collection of foreigners has emerged. A Chinese tech company with close ties to the communist regime is reportedly collecting data of nearly 2.5 million people around the world, including over 50,000 Americans.
Heads of the state from the UK, Canada, Australia, and India, prominent politicians and their family members, military officers, the British royal family, and promising entrepreneurs whose startups are developing cutting-edge technology. These are among the 2.4 million people targeted by one Chinese company, which has been developing a massive profile database over the past 3 years. That's according to media reports about a leaked database developed by Zhenhua Data, a tech company from China's Guangdong province. Translated from Chinese, the company's name means China Revival. The database was initially obtained by independent American researcher Christopher Bolding last year. Several media outlets from India, Australia, the UK, and more revealed it. According to a new research paper co-authored by Bolding and cyber expert Robert Potter, the majority of the data was collected from publicly available sources. That includes social media and news articles. But the experts say the sheer scale of the data is concerning. The experts also point out the Chinese company's close ties with the communist regime. The company maintains extensive partnerships with China's defense and intelligence agencies. The company told Chinese state media that their operations are part of normal business behavior and accused Western media of misinterpretation. China Revival took down its official website after the report was published. A former employee of China's controversial tech company Huawei says it's an open secret that Chinese companies collect intelligence for the regime. He left Huawei in April 2019.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. Other than China Revival, there are companies in China's Fujian and Zhejiang provinces that also do it. Huawei and the semiconductor producer SMIC have all done it. They are backed by the CCP and the Chinese military.
Jin said China could potentially use the data to influence elections in democratic countries.
Manipulate elections, targeting certain demographics and sending them disinformation, or target public figures that the CCP doesn't like, then make up rumors to discredit those people.
Media reports also reveal the company's interest in Australia's space and science sector. So far, it has tracked the movements of Australia's top-secret space equipment. The company's CEO, a former IBM employee, has said on Chinese social media that data collected from social media can be used for hybrid and psychological warfare. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
In what could be a breach of international law, Australian police accessed correspondence of top Chinese diplomats. That's according to an ABC investigation. It's part of a probe into whether China is meddling in Australian politics. Search warrants seen by ABC show Australian police are investigating if there's an attempt by China's Sydney consulate to influence votes by infiltrating the Labour Party. Investigators are searching to find out whether New South Wales Labour MP Shaket Musselmain is involved with Beijing, including his policy advisor John Zhang and the Chinese consul in Sydney, Sun Yantao, who coordinates China's foreign influence agency, the United Front Work Department in Sydney. According to ABC, policy advisor Zhang accused Australian authorities of seizing his emails and messages between top-level diplomats in what would be a breach of international and Australian law. But if Zhang is convicted of foreign interference, he could face up to 15 years in jail. Aside from Zhang, the warrants also name at least 7 other people suspected of being part of the plot to meddle in the elections. 3 of those are journalists working for Chinese state-run media. Federal agents raided Musselmain's home and office in June. Musselmain has denied any wrongdoing. Tensions have simmered between the two countries since Australia questioned the origin of the virus. Australia recently pulled 2 journalists home from China. This after they were questioned by Chinese authorities regarding the arrest of Australian TV anchor Chen Lei in China. Senior officials, meanwhile, told ABC the questioning could be in retaliation to the investigation. And another Australian politician is also facing questions regarding China. Victoria's Labour Premier Daniel Andrews is being asked about his choice to sign on to China's controversial Belt and Road Initiative. It's part of a push to review foreign agreements that could pose a threat to national interest under Prime Minister Scott Morrison's new Foreign Relations Bill. The Belt and Road Initiative in Victoria is expected to be one of the first major deals to be cancelled under the new bill. China, meanwhile, has increased pressure on Australian exports. The General Administration of Customs in China is imposing enhanced inspection on shipments of Australian wheat. According to the Australian government, China is one of Australia's biggest wheat exporters. In 2017, China imported nearly $400 million worth of wheat from Australia. This comes after Beijing imposed a crippling 80% tariff on Australian barley in May. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.